Welcome to Dialogue. China's census data is finally out. China is still the most populous country on earth, but the country is aging. What have we learned from this census, and what challenges will the changing demographic of China pose to its future? To find out, I'm glad to be joined by Professor Zhang Gong from the University of International Business and Economics, who's currently in Washington, D.C., and in Beijing by Hu Naijun. Professor Hu Naijun is with the School of Public Policy and Management at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, actually. And Steve Keen is crowd-funded professor of economics on Patreon, who's in Bangkok right now. That is our topic. I'm Wang Guan. Professor Hu, let me go to you first. What's your major takeaway from this latest census that finally came out?
Well, just as you have mentioned that I'm caring about elder care industry in China. As we all know, yes, we can see a little growth of our whole population, but we must see that the structure is changing very fastly. That is to say, if we see the detail of our population, we can see the ratio of the elder people is increasing, while the people in the labor age, that is to say, the people aging from 14 years to 59 years old is decreasing. That is to say, in the future, we will have more and more people who are in need of elder care services, and at the same time, we have less and less people who can deliver these kind of services. And if we see the family data, we can see the average person of each family in China is also decreasing. We can see currently every household there is only 2.62 person in the family. That is to say, in the future, the family's function and capacity to elder care services will also decreasing. So I think in the old data and in all the future trends, we can see a very kind of challenging situation of our elder care services.
Yeah, there's another issue of grave concern, that is the slowing birth rate in China. Professor Zhang Gong, how do you look at it? How big a concern is it? What's your takeaway from this data, this census data?
Well, I can talk about two things. One is actually it's surprising to me that the population actually recorded a little bit of an increase over last year. I thought we already peaked. We're starting to decline the total population, but surprisingly, we still increasing just a little bit. But I think the trend is very clear in that we're going to see population decline in the future. Family sizes, as the previous speaker said, that's also declining. And also another thing that's also surprises me is that we appear to be able to achieve quite a lot in terms of education. The percentage of the population that has received baccalaureate education is quite high in my view. It's around like 15%. That's actually quite a significant achievement. So I think on the bad news is that population is declining. And I think the good news is that probably I think the education level, the literacy rates, and also I think the productivity side of things is also improving, somehow compensating the shortage of labor supply that I will foresee in the future.
Professor King, what do you think about this latest census data? Anything impressed you?
Well, it's necessary, I think, for human population to fall in general. And it's mainly because we're putting far too much impact on the planet as we are as a species. That's mainly been done by the wealthy rather than the poor, of course, and that has to be taken into account as well. But I think China, by bringing in the one-child policy so many years ago, is probably the only country experienced with population control. And I think that'll be an advantage in the coming decades for China, whatever problems it might cause right now.
Okay, that's original. Professor Hu, let me circle back to you. And really, we won't talk about this issue of declining birth rate. What do you think are the cultural and perhaps socioeconomic factors that led to this sharp decline in the birth rate of China?
Well, if you see other countries, such as some developed countries, we can also witness a kind of decline in the birth rate. That is to say, as long as we have economic growth, the birth rate will decrease because of the more and more women will take part in the labor, more and more women will be educated, and more family will have a higher income, then the birth rate will decline. However, if we see the total birth rate, it is only 1.3 in this census. That is to say, it is too low. So I think in the future, we have to spare no efforts in increasing the birth rate of China. But in my opinion, that is not easy, because if we want to increase our total birth rate, there will be a comprehensive industry. We have to take healthcare, housing, house prices. We have to take into all these factors into our considerations. We have to lower the burdens of our younger generations, so on and so forth. So I don't think it is easy, but we must do the things to increase the birth rate.
Yeah, indeed, Professor Hu, a lot need to be done for young Chinese couples to be willing to have more babies. I mean, what are the first things? What are the lower hanging fruits? What are the things the government can do right now, or for the next step in the foreseeable future, that can really, help boost the birth rate?
Well, right now there are several advices for this improvement, such as the more and more health care insurance endorsement, and more kind of, for example, in China, there will be more and more holidays in the future, and the working time to Chinese people will be declining. That is to say, right now, the Chinese people have more working time than any developed countries. So I think we must lower the burden of our younger generations from work time, from spare time, and in the future, I think we also have some policies in controlling the housing prices, because the housing prices is also the burden and the cost of giving birth to new babies.
You know what, I agree 120% of what you said as a new parent. Professor Zhang Gong, let me go back to you. I mean, if you look around the world, developed, industrialized countries usually saw their birth rate declining at a certain stage of their socioeconomic development, though occasionally their population is boosted by the influx of immigrants. So when you compare China's slowing birth rate versus that in the West, do you think they're caused largely by the similar reasons or by different ones?
I don't see anything different. I think it's a general trend that as a country reaches a certain level of development, adults would be reluctant to having babies. I think there are two reasons going on here. One is that historically people raise children for their own. When they get old, somebody can support themselves, somebody can take care of themselves. I think that function is really going away as people get healthier, get older, live longer. And also, we have some degree of social networks there to make sure that the people of elderly age can still have a kind of a decent life. And I think the second reason is that it's a lot to do with the cost of raising a baby. Inevitably, it's going up, because people care more about the quality of raising a baby. That means you have to provide quality education, housing is expensive, these things. So I think it's a general trend that almost every developed country, quite advanced developed countries, see a population decline. For example, in Japan, it's happening. In South Korea, it's happening. In Asia, it's happening a lot in Scandinavian countries. And I think the latest statistics are showing that it's also happening in the United States as well. So, so I don't think China can be anything exceptional. Culturally, we're very similar to South Korea and Japan. If they're doing the same things, and I bet this country is going to more or less follow the same footsteps.
Yeah, Professor Keen, let me go back to you. When you talk about China's declining birth rate, what kind of policy support and policy incentives do you think are needed and are needed right now for Chinese couples to be willing to give birth to more babies?
I want to see the opposite. I want to see less births, and that's global, not just China. So I'm diametrically opposed to the position your other guests are taking. Humans have to reduce their numbers on this planet, not increase them. And we're already approaching, in terms of carrying capacity for the planet, in terms of where the population looks like it's going to stabilise, independent of what climate change might do us. That's about 10 billion people. We're about 80% of the way there already. So we have to get used to declining rates of growth for all countries around the world. To make it more feasible, you have to have social security. You have to have something which takes the place of wanting children to take care of you in your old age. The state has to do it and provide that through pensions and so on. And that's part of why China, I think, has had a declining birth rate since the days of the transition to capitalism. So that's essential. And you need to have, because it's very unusual for humans to have, very few children, I think you need to look at the social structures as well. You need to have ways that people get a chance to interact with children as you have a declining birth rate. But I don't think there's any reason to focus on the potential economic impact of that. We should have always been transitioning from human labour towards machinery and robotics rather than relying upon the workforce itself. But fundamentally, to make it possible for people to have less children, you have to have more social support coming from society as a whole. China's made a lot of progress there from the days of Mao, but you've still got a lot further to go.
Professor Zhang Gong in Washington, I mean, what do you think will China's new demographic reality mean for its economy going forward?
I think it's going to be a profound change. I can think of a couple of things here. One, for example, is the declining supply of labor. And hopefully this can be somehow compensated by the use of robotics, as the previous speaker said, also by improving productivity, and also by China's industrial structure upgrading to a higher level. That means that we're moving away from labor-intensive industries more into a sort of a innovation-driven knowledge economy. That's the first thing I can think of. The second thing I think has a huge implication, in my view, on the real estate market, on urbanization. One of the statistics released this time is that China's urbanization is actually pretty high now. It's about 65%, and if you look at the most of the developed countries, they're all around like 70%. It takes most countries, most developed countries, almost 40, 50 years to reach there. And we did this probably in about less than 40 years. So that's a quite achievement. Now what it really means is that the real estate market in China is not going to see the kind of high demand that we used to witness. And my sort of more of a pessimistic prediction is that in the future, the real estate in third-tier, fourth-tier cities will probably not be that much. I think the first-tier cities will be okay, but the days of the real estate industry being a major driver of the economic growth is over, in my view. So I think that's a very strong signal that the central government has to take into consideration, and that we have to think about other areas of growth other than the real estate market. And there are a couple of other profound implications, but certainly I think this kind of a demographic change is really fundamental in driving the kind of economic growth we're going to see in the next few years.
Yeah, Professor Hu, let me go to you. Professor Keen just said that we do not necessarily need more, newborn babies. The Earth is already pretty much populated. There are limited resources, for example. Where is the demographic balance here? Should China encourage its citizens to have more children, or should they really focus on taking care of its citizens right now?
Well, I think I have to say that it will be very difficult to increase the birth rate singly. That is to say, if we want to have a more balanced population structure, we must to make sure that the development also is a balanced one. That is to say, we have to have a trade-off between less and less people in working age and the growth of the labor productivity. So that is to say, if we have people to be more educated, to have more knowledge, to have more capacity, to have more productivity, we can increase the efficiency. That can, I would say, can be part of trade-off the decrease of the labor age population. So yes, I have to say we do not have to put all the resources and emphasis or focus on the increase of birth rate, we have to make sure the whole economy and the society can grow. That is to say, we can have some kind of treatment. But however, I want to say our people is not only for production. We have also make sure that people have a better life. That is why we also have to increase the birth rate. We have to have more and more children. So I think this is
Well, why
not,
so? I mean, in order for all of us to live better lives, why do you think we need more children, more people?
what I mean is that to say, in my opinion, we have to have a more balanced family structure. That is to say, if we see the children in nowadays, for example, who were born after 20s, they will have 3 generations of elder people in the future. That is such a high burden in their elder care service in the families. That is to say why I have to say that we should have more and more children to make sure a family have a more balanced generation relationship. That's not for production, and that is for our daily life, for our society. So we do not have to take only economic situations into our consideration. We have to take social, culture factors into our consideration.
I mean, Professor Keen, what do you think?
Well, again, until we bring humanity into balance with the biosphere, there's no reason for more humans. There's a damn good reason for many less humans. And we need to have policies that enable that to happen over time. As I've said, China's already had experience in trying it, ham-fisted, of course, given the old Communist Party way of doing it. But I think that's necessary. And then you have to look at the social supports that go with that. If we are going to have less children, which I think is inevitable, then we have to find some way of keeping the generations in touch with each other and experiencing youth as they age, and not having the youth themselves overwhelmed by old people at the same time. So it's hardly easy, but we have, by some estimates, we've got 2 to 3 times the population that we should have sustainably on this planet. And that's why I just simply can't countenance the idea that any country should be worried about its population rate of growth falling. I think the fact that it's falling without policy is actually a good sign.
And then talking about taking care of the elderly, what are some of the global best practices that you have observed so far that you think can also apply to the situation in China?
Well, mainly the fact that there's good social security. So countries, I mean, they're doing an appalling job right now on COVID, of course, but countries like Sweden have good policies to provide care for the elderly. It's one thing I think the Asian societies have over the Western societies, the extent to which the old live with the family. And that may be very difficult as you start having very few young and lots of old. But the fact that people are taken care of in their community is superior to isolating them and treating them as dispensable. A lot of the very bad debate about COVID in the West has rotated around the idea, oh, somebody's already past 70, if they die, it doesn't matter. That is a very bad way to treat humanity in general, even if we do wish to reduce our numbers overall. So I think building on some of the cultural traditions of Asia in general, where the families live multi-generationally, making that easier, providing support for that, rather than going in the direction of nursing homes, which has happened in the West. I think that's a better way to build a future society with a falling population.
Yeah, that is one aspect of cultural differences there, I guess. Professor Hu, what about rapid developing technologies such as artificial intelligence and automation? How could they make potential issues, arising from an aging population less severe?
Well, as we have witnessed this kind of implementation of higher technology into our elder care service, we can see some kind of auto robots who are serving our elder people, and we also have witnessed some kind of big data, AI, etc., to be implemented in the elder care service. However, in my opinion, yes, the technology is very important, but we also cannot neglect the people's factors. That is to say, in the future, we will also need people to take daily care services to the elder people. That is to say, the high technology, the AI maybe play some kind of part of the services to the elder care, but it cannot replace the people's services completely. That is why we have also to nurture some kind of people who are going to be part of in the industry of elder care services. Technology can solve part of the problem, but technology itself alone cannot solve all the problems, in my opinion.
Yeah, Professor Zhang Gong, for the first time, the average size of a Chinese family, as was mentioned by previous speakers, is dropping to less than 3. Now the average is 2.62. Of course, that only makes mathematical sense there. Is there a general notion of what a society with each family having less than 3 members like? I mean, what does this number tell you?
Well, I mean, for the population to sustain the same size, you have to have, for each family, you have to have 2 kids. So obviously, we're way below that. But I think, the notion that, there's a group of elderly people who's nobody taking care of them, I think that notion is overblown. I think overall in China, home ownership is still pretty high. The percentage of home ownership is pretty high. So I think, even in the absence of a strong social security network, there's still the home equity piece that can support, the people's retirement life. Second, I think overall, in China, the family bonds are still very strong. At least, as my generation is concerned, I think our relationship with our parents are still very strong, and we all feel we have the obligation to support our parents. So I think the problem of taking care of the elderly is probably a little bit overblown. I also want to make a point that I totally reject the notion that the more kids, happier you are. This is very much a personal choice. I think what people happy or not, you have to watch people's action instead of their words. The fact of the matter is, in most developed countries, people are having less children. So obviously, people are voting with their feet. So at the end of the day, it's a personal choice. We are not in a position to educate people about what it means being happy and how to be happy. We're just left to the people to decide for themselves. What we can do, I think, is the government can do is to provide a kind of social security network. One of the speakers mentioned. I think particularly in the healthcare industry, as I said, for elderly people, they have their home ownership. The food budget out of the entire expenditure in a month is actually quite small. I think the major expenditure is really healthcare. And in that aspect, I think the government can indeed to play a role to at least to alleviate the burden for elderly people if they get into something serious illness or incur a very large medical bill. This is something the government can do and can help.
Right. There's a lot that the government should and must do going forward. Professor Hu, what do you make of the regional differences reflected in this national census? Because when we talk about China, it's not a monolithic whole. Different regions have different realities.
Well, I think yes, we have to pay attention to the regional differences of this population. We can see the eastern part of China having more and more population. The percentage of population living in the eastern part is increasing. However, if we see other regions and other parts such as the northeastern region of China, we can see the ratio of total population is decreasing. And according to analysis, we can see that people are gathering in the more developed regions in China. So I think in the future, we can see the human resource competitions between different cities and different regions. And right now, a lot of cities, including our first-tier cities such as Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Nanjing, are increasing their policies to absorb more and more talented people to come to the city. So I think in the future, this competition of human resources will be, in my opinion, more and more fierce.
Professor Keen, one thing we do notice from this census is the fact that the male-female gender imbalance in China has dropped. In fact, they dropped by 6.8%. What does a more balanced gender ratio tell you about China?
Well, I think we know that China didn't have a history of young baby girls not lasting all that long because of historic attitudes to the superiority having a male to a female heir, and that was accentuated during the worst days of the one-child policy. I think that's a very good thing that that's shifting, and if people now willingly let the sex balance fall out naturally, or even try to have more females than was the historical norm, that is a good thing. And yeah, to me, it's a major cultural shift, and that itself reflects the fact that families don't rely upon their children anymore for their safety in their old age. They can rely upon state pension schemes and so on. So I think we need more of that to reduce the distortion that came out of the days when you had to rely upon your children and you were better off if you had a male heir.
Yeah, but Professor Zhang Gong, even though the gender imbalance has dropped by almost 7% in China, there are still around 35 million more girls than boys. I mean, what do you make of that reality? What problem or potential problems do they oppose to, let's say, boys, men in the dating market, or, you know, when it comes to marriage?
Well, the consequence is very simple. You know, 30 million people, 30 million males will not be able to get married, I think. But I think there are a couple of alleviating factors here. One is that, you know, by just increasing passively, not proactively, increasing the age difference between marrying man and marrying woman, we can restore some of the imbalance in the in this relationship. Second, there's one topic we haven't really touched about. That's about immigration. I think we're starting to see more and more females being married into China from other countries. We have heard tons of stories from, say, used to be Burma, used to be Myanmar, used to be Vietnam. Now we are starting to see more and more stories of other countries, Eastern European countries, Central European countries. So I think that's another factor. As the living standard here in China is increasing, as the income level here in China is increasing, this country becomes quite attractive as a immigration country for a lot of people. There are other factors that can alleviate this picture. I think overall, it's good news that the imbalance between male and female and the gender imbalance is getting improved. It used to be a lot worse than that, but it's comforting to see that it's getting better a little bit.
Yeah, Professor Hu, are you more troubled or are you more encouraged by this reality of gender imbalance dropping?
Well, I think as to gender imbalance, we have to say that is some kind of natural causes in this. Because according to the scientific experiences, it is not a 100 to 100 ratio of boy and girls. So I think we have to accept it as it is. And in my opinion, since we have more and more loose birth control and more children would be born in the future. So I don't think there is some kind of human factors in this kind of imbalance between boys and girls. So in my opinion, I'm not troubled at all about this kind of boy and girl age ratios, because as some guests have said that there will be more and more boys who will not be married. I don't think so, because it doesn't say that one girl has to marry a time in the lifetime. A girl can marry several times in their whole lifetime. So I don't think there will be too much worrying about this kind of ratios between boys and girls.
This is probably one of the most complicated topics. So many factors, complicating factors. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you, gentlemen, for this fascinating discussion. And thank you, our viewers, for watching Dialogue. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing.